History 1. My family and I have always been the biggest skeptics, which is why I can't quite explain what happened that day. I went downstairs and saw my brother Sam in the kitchen. I grabbed a water and asked him if he believed in ghosts. He shook his head, but then told me a story about something that seemed kind of paranormal to him. I looked at him and asked, "Did you ever try to scare me when I came home from school?" I planned on asking that question to follow up with my own story. Once he said no, somehow that calmed me down, and I decided not to bring up anything else, thinking it was some kind of closure. He continued by saying, "But all I did was shoot a Nerf gun bullet at you while you were on the computer." I wish he hadn't said that, because it wasn't what happened to me in 8th grade. I do remember him shooting a Nerf gun at me, but it felt insignificant compared to what I was about to tell him. I continued. It happened in middle school during 8th grade, just after the new year started. I came home that day and went to my bedroom, set my bed, and put in earbuds to watch YouTube videos. Mom called to tell me that Sam would be leaving soon to go to a friend's house. My parents also worked late, which meant I'd be home alone. I was a very quiet kid when no one was around because I always feared there could be someone in the house with me. If I didn't make much noise, they couldn't find me, right? Who knew that suspicion could have possibly been true? I paused my YouTube video and headed to the bathroom. Our house has a weird layout, so I'll try to explain the important parts. If you were in my bathroom facing the door, you could step out and take a left. Sam's room would be at the end of the short hallway. If you went right, you'd reach the stairway that went down and stopped at a platform in the middle, and then you'd walk in the same direction to get lower. The stairway leads to our main entrance. We also have an alarm system that announces when any doors or windows are opened. I was in the bathroom, just about to flush the toilet, when I heard a loud thud from Sam's room. I assumed he was about to leave for his friend's house, so I flushed the toilet and got up to wash my hands. But then, there were no more noises. The house felt still, but I felt like I was being listened to. I turned off the sink and walked over to the bathroom door to lock it. Something felt wrong. My stomach started to ache from fear. I felt like I was just being paranoid, but I couldn't shake that weird feeling in my gut, so I waited for another noise. I didn't have my phone on me, so I couldn't text Sam. We had a house phone in there, but it made loud noises when you dialed, so I didn't want to risk it. Then I heard talking, definitely coming from Sam's room, but it wasn't his voice. It couldn't have been Dad either. The muttering was deep and low, sending shivers down my spine. It had a distinctive sound, like the S or T in words, but I couldn't understand what it was saying. Then there was a slow pounding noise that started getting closer to me. It came out of Sam's room and made its way towards the bathroom door. It stopped dead in its tracks right at the door. I threw myself away from the door, near the window, hoping that if it busted in, I could get away. I couldn't fight whoever it was since I was a weak 8th grader, so that was out of the question. I covered my mouth to keep from breathing loudly in case they didn't know I was in the bathroom. The pounding continued to the stairway and then stopped. I heard a loud crashing noise from what I thought was the middle platform of the stairs, and then again at the bottom. The muttering stopped, and the loud pounding made its way to the door. I heard the door open and close, and the alarm went off for the door. I didn't know if it was safe, so I made my way to the door and rested my hands on the doorknob, still covering my mouth. To the left of me, towards the ground, is a laundry chute that leads to our laundry room. If someone were to get from the main floor to the laundry room, it would definitely take over 30 seconds. But about 10 seconds after the door opened and closed, a vicious jabbing noise pounded at the small laundry chute door. I stood there in awe, not sure what to do. It sounded like someone took the end of a broom and reached up there to stab at the door. I watched as the pounding of the door vibrated the small laundry chute door, hoping it wouldn't bust open. Then it ended. I waited in the bathroom for what seemed like an eternity, and then quietly crept to my room to call my parents. No one picked up, so I waited for them to get home and held my door handle to make sure no one could get in since I didn't have a lock on it. When my parents got home, they didn't believe me. Soon after, Sam arrived and doubted me as well. Telling this to Sam made his mouth drop. He continued to tell me that he used to hear things coming from the attic that used to open up in his bedroom. I will honestly never forget that day. Sam and I can't figure out who or what that was, and I try not to think too hard about it. I still don't quite know what happened, and I may never know, but I want to. History 2. My name's Lisa. I was 17 years old at the time, living with my mom in a cramped apartment in Queens, New York. Living in Queens was quite an experience, though not a pleasant one. There were always sketchy characters around, and it was usually scary to walk alone at night. The apartment was small, and the neighbors were creepy. I don't mean that lightly. Our apartment was the second to last one in a hallway on the 6th floor, and our neighbor, the owner of the last apartment in the hall, always seemed to be sitting outside his door, perched on the windowsill. He always made a point of looking at me when I entered the apartment, even when I was with my mom. My mom told me to stay away from that man. We never even knew his name. He was an older white man in his 60s, with very little hair left, and what remained was gray. He always had the same emotionless expression on his face when he looked at me. Then one day, it started. Every time I saw him in the hall, he would say hi to me, but he'd call me by my name. To make it even creepier, I wasn't sure how he got my name, but I never asked. One night my mom was working the night shift, so I'd be home alone all night. I came home around 9 p.m., and the neighbor was, as usual, sitting on that windowsill, as if he didn't have anything going on in his life. As I unlocked the door, this time instead of saying hi, he asked me if my mom was working tonight. Here's where I look back and cringe because of my own stupidity. I foolishly nodded yes. He didn't say anything after that. He just slowly nodded his head. I didn't say anything else either. I simply walked inside and shut the door. I had enough of his creepy presence for one night. After getting home, I washed up a bit, had a snack, did some laundry, and took a shower. As I was in the shower, I heard a weird grumbling noise. It was a pretty concerning noise, but I couldn't even begin to figure out what it could have been. I got out of the shower after hearing it because I was worried someone might have been in the apartment. I heard a similar noise outside the bathroom, and it seemed to come from my bedroom. I quickly threw on the clothes I had in the bathroom and searched my entire room. I couldn't find anyone, but while searching, I noticed a tiny hole in the wall. I got closer to feel it and look at it, then got down on my knees to look through it. What I saw on the other side made me fall backward in fear. It was someone's eye. Someone was actually looking through that hole from the other side. I realized this wall separated our apartment from the creepy neighbor's apartment. Then I had a sudden realization of what the sound I heard in the bathroom must have been. I ran back to the shower and felt all around the wall until I found another hole, identical in size to the one in my room. The neighbor had drilled these holes, maybe even more, to spy on me. I called my mom and told her what happened, and as I was on the phone with her, there were knocks on the apartment door. It was the neighbor, and he kept yelling, "Open the door right now. I didn't drill those holes." My mom freaked out and told me to call the cops. She tried to get home as soon as possible. One good thing about Queens is the police response time is fast. There were cops at my apartment door in under 5 minutes, and my mom was home half an hour later. My mom pressed charges for stalking, invasion of privacy, and criminal mischief. The apartment building also evicted the man and patched up the holes at his expense. History 3. I'll never forget the time my friend Joe and I went camping. Joe is an Eagle Scout and nature lover, so he's always going out on these camping trips. One time I decided to come along and see what it was all about. He went with us, and his girlfriend Sarah also joined. I received a last-minute invitation, so we carpooled together and arrived at the destination 3 hours later. Joe doesn't believe in going to regular campsites because it doesn't give the real camping experience when you're surrounded by other people. So he took us to some random dirt trail off a dead-end road that he seemed to know about. He drove down this dirt road into the woods for a couple of minutes until he seemed to be content with where we were. Then he put the car in park. It was such an inconspicuous place to stop that I wasn't even aware at first that we were getting out there. Joe unloaded the trunk. Most of the stuff we brought consisted of tents, sleeping bags, food, toilet paper, and first aid equipment. Joe said he usually packed a lot lighter but was making this an easy trip for Sarah and me, whatever that meant. Once we found a good place to set up camp, Joe basically assigned us tasks. Setting up a tent was one thing I knew how to do, so Joe told me to set up the 2 tents. Sarah stayed behind with me and kind of helped with the tents, while also unpacking some of the supplies. Joe went off to find dry firewood. He would come back every so often with a couple of pieces of wood. Nightfall came quicker than expected. Thankfully, Joe had collected enough wood by then to start a nice fire, and the tents were pitched. We sat by the fire, drinking and reminiscing about old memories, most of which Sarah was not in the picture for. I imagine she got tired of hearing our drunken, nonsensical stories because she went to her tent before Joe and me. So Joe and I stayed up for a little while longer, now being a bit quieter and keeping the laughter to a minimum as a courtesy to Sarah. I finished my last beer, and I was finally feeling it by then. We chatted for a bit more until Joe told me to shush and listen. I heard it too. There was walking out in the distance beyond the area illuminated by the fire. Joe assured me it was likely a deer. When I naively asked, "What if it's a bear?" He reassured me that a bear would not come this close to a campfire or the sound of people. I asked him if he was sure about that, but he didn't answer. The footsteps seemed to be going in circles, getting ever so slightly louder with each passing minute. When the footsteps got close enough, we started to hear a disturbing noise. It was like a clicking, growling type of noise. "Is that a wolf?" I whispered. Joe didn't answer. He just motioned for me to get into the tents. I did what he said. I got into the tent that I pitched for myself, and I believe Joe got into the tent that I pitched for him and Sarah. The clicking noise outside was getting more and more clear, and it increasingly became obvious it was not the sound of a wolf or a bear or any kind of animal I could imagine. It didn't even sound like something from this planet. The light from the fire outside cast an eerie glow onto the walls of the tents, and I had to cover my mouth so that I wouldn't scream when I saw the shadow on the tent walls. Some horrific, huge, bipedal thing was walking past my tent. The footsteps were so slow but so heavy. It moved away from my tent towards the direction of Joe and Sarah's tent. The next thing I remember, besides waiting in absolute horror, was Sarah's scream. She screamed as if something were about to kill her. I didn't know what was happening, but I heard Joe screaming outside, "Run!" over and over. I heard the two of them hurrying away outside, so I rushed outside and followed. We ran in the pitch black, no flashlights, nothing, and yet we still knew we were being chased by something. Footsteps followed close behind me since I was in the back. By some miracle, Joe managed to lead us right to the car, and without looking back, we all got into our respective seats, and Joe floored it down the trail. Joe drove down the dirt trail for about half a minute before we came to a dead end. He had to somehow turn the pickup truck around now in this dark forest, not too far from where we were being chased. I urged him to turn off the lights so that whatever was chasing us wouldn't see us. He insisted he needed the lights on, though, so that he wouldn't hit any trees trying to turn the truck around. He shifted from drive to reverse, over and over. Meanwhile, I sat in the back seat, biting my nails and clenching my teeth, looking around the woods outside, terrified that I might see that thing from our campsite. At long last, Joe got the truck completely turned around, and he once again stepped on it to get us out of that forest. We left everything at that campsite, at least $100 worth of equipment, but there was zero chance of us ever going back there. What caused Sarah to scream was heavy breathing, and something pushing into their tent, trying to rip it open. Joe still says he's never heard or seen anything like that in his life. He still has no idea what it could have been, but it definitely walked on 2 legs. How do we know it wasn't a person, you might ask? Simply because of its size and the noises it made. I think everyone has one truly horrific, unexplainable experience in their lives, and this was ours.